A 30-year-old office worker is transported to another world and ends up marrying a 12-year-old wife. Although Ars isn't good at many things, he attracts talents with his golden identifying ability. After his father's death, he inherits the family head position at just 12 years old. He also helps the local lord in his domain to fight for power as the empire is corrupt and rife with rebellions. After the governor of Mishan state, where Ars's domain is located, dies, his eldest and youngest sons start a power struggle, splitting the state into two factions. Ars supports the eldest son, Kuran, and is currently traveling to join the war. Mireille and Charlotte enjoy the scenery atop the carriage, with Charlotte tasting the sea for the first time and discovering its saltiness, unlike Mireille, who has traveled extensively. Noticing Charlotte's disappointment, Ars comforts her, promising to travel together after the war. They soon arrive at Santapula City, where many lords have gathered. Despite being young and from a remote area, Ars faces initial disdain. However, Curran greets him warmly, recognizing Mireille, his former advisor who had previously refused Curran's invitation, but is now with Ars. Curran, unbothered, reprimands other lords who doubt Ars and Mireille, urging cooperation before starting a military meeting. The current military strength is 110,000 on their side against the enemy's 130,000. Despite being outnumbered, they have the wealthy city of Santapula, better funding, and superior soldier quality. However, the enemy has talented commanders, and neutral nobles are being drawn to them. Curran aims to establish a new nation and wants to avoid spending too much time on his brother. Some lords suggest taking the economically strong but poorly defended city of Belzid to the east. Displaying their strength could shift the allegiance of nobles leaning towards the enemy. Most lords agree, but Ars's subordinates are visibly concerned. Mireille sarcastically criticizes the plan, insisting they would surely lose without proper knowledge of the enemy. She describes the younger son as a perfectionist and coward, who won't act unless victory is certain. She warns that attacking Belzid could leave Santapula vulnerable to a sneak attack. The lords were left speechless by her arguments. Curran also realized she made sense and asked if she had any suggestions. Mireille then passed the speaking right to Russell. Seeing a child like him, the lords scoffed, but Russell quickly proved them wrong. He first affirmed the strategy of taking Belzid, noting it would greatly benefit them, provided they kept Santapula well defended during this period to deny the enemy any opportunity. So, they could make the enemy believe that an attack from Alcantes would result in being sandwiched. In that case, they needed to first bring the state of Paradiro to their side. However, Paradiro, a state loyal to the royal family, would likely not assist them, given Mishan's known aspirations for independence. Russell suggested that using a mediator to negotiate with Paradiro would suffice, and his chosen mediator was the emperor himself. The current emperor had little real power, and his courtiers had led to the empire's corruption, so using bribes was feasible. Mireille agreed with this. Kuran chose to trust them and delegated the task entirely to Ars, arranging for his own retainer, Rummel, to assist. The other lords looked on unfavorably at Ars, but he had no choice but to accept the task. He had hoped to rely on Mr. Leeds as usual, but Leeds was unavailable this time due to severe racial discrimination in the capital. Mireille also excused herself from the negotiation. Now, who should they send to negotiate? Everyone had a suitable candidate in mind: Ars's fiancée, Lisia. Upon hearing that Ars was coming to visit, Lisia had been waiting since early morning. Ars had intended to discuss the situation with his future father-in-law, but Lisia pulled him inside, insisting on treating them well. After a hearty meal, she showed Ars around their estate. Lisia had always stayed at home, but since returning from Ars's, she had started interacting with the townspeople and made several friends. This earned her even more respect for Ars, who had kept the towns safe. While speaking, Lisia began to confess her feelings and moved closer to Ars, startling him as he thought she was about to kiss him. Instead, Lisia just wanted to show him the flowers, many of which Ars had given her before. After the tour, Ars brought up the matter at hand. This required Lisia's father's approval, but Lisia said she wanted to make her own decisions, which is why she brought Ars here. Ars explained the situation, hoping Lisia would help them negotiate with the capital. Without hesitation, Lisia agreed. However, in exchange, she had a request for Ars, which he naturally could not refuse. Unexpectedly, Lisia proposed on the spot, hoping to marry Ars after the war. Although shocked, Ars felt her sincere affection and knew she truly loved him. Having been helped by her throughout, he had no reason to refuse. Ars didn't even want to wait until after the war and proposed to Lisia, hoping she would marry him now. The two confessed their feelings for each other. Ars also promised to protect Lisia during the war, and Lisia, overwhelmed with joy, cried. She vowed to support Ars as his partner until his dreams were fulfilled. Thus, the young couple engaged themselves without waiting for their parents' approval. Lisia's father was furious when he heard the news. His daughter was still so young, yet she was about to be married off to Ars, that rascal. However, he couldn't bear to see his daughter upset, so he agreed to the marriage and immediately announced a celebration banquet. As for the negotiations, they would wait until after the festivities. By then, there was news from the intelligence that Captain Pham had been tasked to gather. The person abusing the Emperor's power was Chancellor Shakma, so they just needed to target him. Ars and the others discussed the negotiation process. First, they would go to Santa Pula and ask Lord Curran to prepare a ship to the capital. Upon arrival, they would employ Chancellor Shakma to mediate with Paradiro State. Then, they would attempt formal negotiations with Paradiro, asking them to become allies. Lisia was in charge of the negotiations. However, being young, the other party might not trust her, so she would bring Rummel, a trusted aide of Lord Curran, for more credibility. Mireille was very pleased with Lisia's performance, proud that she was Ars's fiancée. Charlotte, on the other hand, was displeased, questioning if it was the right time for marriage with war looming. Lisia silenced her with a few words, and Charlotte agreed to come along to protect them. After Ars and his party set off, Captain Pham rode after them, reporting new intelligence that the younger son had allied with Sight State. He then left after sharing the news. Ars checked the map, realizing their camp could be sandwiched between the younger son's forces and Sight State. If Sights attacked Mishan State, Ramberg would be the first to be hit. Lisia comforted Ars, urging him not to worry too much. If they could successfully sway Paradiro State, the battle situation could be balanced, and they could catch the enemy by surprise. However, this made the success of the negotiations crucial. Suddenly, the carriage jolted, spilling several books on political science from Lisia's bag. It turned out Lisia had also been working hard in secret. After all, she was to be Ars's wife, and must fully support him. Upon reaching Santa Pula, Curran informed them of the situation. Lisia mentioned they were already aware, and after negotiations with Paradiro State, they would negotiate with Sight State, asking them not to advance. Curran was also pleased with Lisia's performance, and upon hearing Ars and Lisia had already married, he congratulated them. Then, Curran's eldest son Rengu came to greet them, and Ars recognized Rengu's capabilities. Curran invited him for a private talk, expressing concerns about his son's abilities. Previously, he had let him be, but now he wanted to encourage his strengths, unsure of what they were. Ars frankly admitted that Rengu's current capabilities were not high, but his potential was promising. Reassured by Ars's words, Curran was relieved. Preparing the ships would take some time, so Ars and his party went shopping. Charlotte was not shy about buying a lot of local products. Lisia, as a wife, was more reserved, but Ars noticed her eyeing a brooch and bought it for her. It was just a simple gift, as he planned to give her a formal engagement gift later. Lisia happily accepted the brooch, and they boarded the ship together. Rengu unexpectedly joined us, eager to achieve great deeds in the capital and impress his father. However, shortly after we set sail, Rengu became seasick. While he was leaning over the side of the ship, he noticed people on a small boat waving at us. We pulled them aboard and learned they were fishermen who had been adrift at sea. Charlotte offered them wine, but they quickly took her hostage, unfortunately grabbing the strongest among us. Annoyed, Charlotte blew them up. However, Ars noticed their weapons were not swords, but kitchen knives used for fishing, suggesting they were not pirates. The leader confessed they were fishermen who worked at the capital's port. They used to borrow money from the government to fish, but as the capital's finances worsened, they could no longer get loans and had to borrow from merchants at high interest rates, leaving them desperate. Ars sympathized with their plight and gave them 3 gold coins as a loan, expecting repayment once they earned money. Rengu was shocked, believing these men untrustworthy. But Ars explained that a leader who does not trust his people cannot gain their trust. Even if betrayed, without mutual change, their relationship would remain the same. By trusting the people, they would eventually trust him back, although Rengu still thought Ars naive. Nevertheless, the fishermen left with the money Ars provided, and we soon arrived at the capital, a city center surprisingly run down. The streets were filled with impoverished people while the nobility lived in wealth, blind to the poor. Rengu optimistically suggested that Chancellor Shakma was blinded by money and would be an easy opponent in negotiations. However, Lisia remained cautious and prepared for the next day's talks, which surprisingly involved wearing a beautiful dress. Shakma, already informed of their arrival, was waiting at the castle. Ars assessed him and found his political skill, intelligence, and ambition very high, making him a tough negotiator. Shakma simply invited them to sit without much regard for who they were, only caring about the money involved. The negotiations began as Lisia had anticipated. On the ship, she had already gathered everyone to discuss. They could only offer 2,000 gold coins. If Shakma wanted more, they would have to return for more funds. The goal was to make Shakma feel like he was getting a good deal by starting with a low offer. Lisia initially offered 500 gold coins. Shakma asked if she had missed a zero, to which Lisia playfully responded, suggesting that 5,000 gold coins would exceed the capital's annual budget. Before arriving, she had already observed the city's condition and knew Chancellor Shakma was facing financial difficulties. Thus, they began a tough negotiation. Eventually, Lisia reluctantly offered 1,000 gold coins, claiming that was all they had. To everyone's surprise, Shakma agreed, and the negotiation seemed successful. However, Rengu, naively, blurted out that they actually had 2,000 gold coins and insisted on offering the full amount, not wanting to seem stingy. His comments jeopardized the negotiation as Shakma was no longer satisfied with the deal, wanting economic compensation. With only 2,000 gold coins in hand, they could only watch as Shakma walked away. Rengu, the instigator, was remorseful and realized they needed to return to Santapula to gather more funds. He blamed Ars and Lisia, thinking if they had initially offered 2,000 gold coins, the Emperor would have mediated, and they wouldn't have underestimated Santapula's financial strength. Ars was speechless, and in a critical moment, it was Lisia who chased after Shakma to apologize. She took off her coat and dress, removed her expensive jewelry, and offered them as part of the deal. Shakma's assistant confirmed the items were worth 500 gold coins, and eventually, Shakma agreed to their terms. After the negotiation, Ars was relieved despite the troubles, but Lisia said everything went as expected. The most important thing for them was not to lower the amount, but to quickly conclude the negotiations. Even if Rengu hadn't revealed they had 2,000 gold coins, the negotiation wouldn't have ended so easily. Shakma would have looked for a chance to be bribed, so Rengu's remark was just a trigger for the event. Lisia had prepared her clothes and jewelry ahead, and the negotiation ended successfully, without Shakma realizing their strategy. So, everything was within Lisia's expectations. However, Rengu was unhappy again, feeling Ars and Lisia were dishonest, questioning how such people could be loyal to Mishan. Rummel earnestly explained to the young lord that having power from birth meant he didn't need to lie or flatter others. But Ars and Lisia had to think about how to protect their people as lords, and lying was justifiable for that cause. It didn't mean they didn't love Mishan, but Rengu still couldn't accept it and ran away crying. Ars quietly left, understanding that Rengu's outburst was due to his straightforward nature rather than dislike. Rummel mentioned Rengu just hadn't learned how to express love yet, but believed he could become an excellent king. Meanwhile, Shakma wrote to Paradiro as agreed. A week later, Paradiro's envoy arrived in the capital, and Rengu returned just before the negotiations, although no one knew what he did during that week. The negotiations were set to start again. Before the negotiations began, Paradiro's diplomat first asked Ars if they were planning to declare independence, specifically requesting Rengu to answer. Surprisingly, Rengu, who had matured in just a week, did not rashly disclose Mishan's plans to form their own nation. Instead, he cleverly shifted the blame to their political enemy, Basamak. Even more unexpectedly, the other side believed him and expressed a willingness to ally with them, mainly out of respect for the emperor, with the diplomat shaking Ars's hand to formalize the alliance. This was largely thanks to Rengu. Rewinding to 1 week prior, on a rainy night, Rengu rushed to Lisia's door, bowing and apologizing. He realized he had almost ruined everything despite everyone's efforts, and had wrongly accused them of disloyalty to Mishan after hearing Rummel's words. Ashamed, he sought Lisia's advice on how he could be of help. Sensing Rengu's sincerity, Lisia allowed him to attend various banquets in the imperial city. Given that he had openly spoken about sensitive matters during the negotiations with Shakma, everyone would see him as very honest. Thus, Lisia had Rengu spread rumors that it was Basamak's camp planning independence, which everyone readily believed. As Lisia expected, this preparation made the negotiations with Paradiro go smoothly, and Rengu learned a lot from Ars and Lisia, fully trusting them. Their journey was filled with laughter and joy. Ars and his group did not rush back to Santa Pula, but went straight to negotiate with Sites, persuading them to abandon their aggressive plans, successfully containing them. Upon returning to Santa Pula, they received news of the successful negotiations and Rengu's growth. Immediately, Rengu decided to go for training. As he turned, Ars saw new values in his abilities, which had all increased. Lord Curran was very grateful to Ars and his retainers, rewarding them with all the saved money. Ars's first thought upon receiving the money was to help repair the village wells and give his soldiers a raise, truly a lord who cares for his people. However, Curran then mentioned the upcoming war, planning to invade Alphata County and asking Rummel and Ars to command the entire army of Canary County to crush the opponent. Ars accepted this task, but it was his first time commanding such a large force. Charlotte, worried about the pressure on him, ran to comfort him, suggesting Ars could stay in the mansion and wait for good news. However, Ars could not simply leave everything to his retainers. He was mentally prepared for the challenge. Back at home, several individuals remained. Russell underwent Spartan training with Mireille, and after barely finishing, hurriedly asked Mireille to teach him tactics as agreed. But Mireille delegated the task to Leeds, mentioning Ars in front of him. Suddenly, Leeds panicked, fearing something bad had happened to Ars on the road and insisting he had to go rescue him. Russell urged him not to pressure Leeds with Ars's last request to take care of the mansion. When Ars and his group returned, he had just been mentioned, and they arrived home. During dinner, he shared their experiences in Santa Pula with Mireille and the others, and spoke of the imminent battle. They were preparing to lead the army the day after tomorrow, so he suggested that everyone rest well tomorrow. Since they would not see Lisia for some time, Ars spent the day touring their territory with her. The villagers, having heard about the war, gathered around them. They were not anxious, but concerned for Lord Ars, offering them lots of food and fruit. Before returning home, Ars visited his father's grave alone to talk about his recent experiences, as he was about to fight his first battle. He recalled being stopped by his father the last time he was set to go to war, and wondered if he now had the look of a warrior. Regardless, he resolved to fight for the land and its people. Unexpectedly, Leeds and 2 others also arrived, wanting to pay respects to the old lord before deploying. They assured the old lord that they would protect Lord Ars and were confident of victory. On the day of departure, Lisia handed Ars his sword, promising to guard their lands until his triumphant return. Once the soldiers from various territories had assembled, Curran raised his arms, instantly boosting morale. In his speech, he specifically mentioned Ars's contributions, noting how their situation had improved thanks to the efforts of Ars and his retainers. Seeing the soldiers' excited faces and enthusiastic cheers, Ars finally understood why his father had participated in wars that might lead to death. The companions who risk their lives together indeed provide a profound sense of security. Ars is about to enter his first battle, and his subordinates are worried. Russell catches up to share his thoughts on Canari's military tactics. This preparation should allow them to handle any strategy their opponents use. Everyone reassures Ars that he is not fighting alone. He has many comrades behind him. This boosts Ars's spirits, and he joins Lord Curran in a full military assault. However, upon reaching the city gates, they see a white flag, and the gates open willingly. Ars is confused, but Curran suggests the enemy might have lost the will to fight upon seeing their formidable strength. They expect no major battles before Belzed. Ars is relieved, not realizing this is all part of Basamak's strategy, sacrificing one territory to make the enemy overconfident, then setting a trap in the next, with a major general lying in wait. This bald general is very confident about the upcoming war, assuring the Lord not to worry and to leave everything to him. However, the Lord's daughter is unhappy and disapproves of her father's subservience to the bald man. She argues that they cannot entrust everything to someone else in a war that affects their subjects. The Lord confesses he cannot bear such a heavy burden, letting the bald man take the lead, as he only needs to defend the most critical strongholds. Concerned for her aging father, the daughter volunteers to help defend these key points. Meanwhile, Curran's camp discusses their battle plans. The leader wants to end the fight with minimal casualties. Ars looks to Russell, who shares his strategy. Given that Samak County has 3 fortresses each manned by about 1,000 soldiers, they plan to attack each fortress with 3 divisions of 4,000 troops. Such an overwhelming force should quickly secure a surrender. The main force will wait near the towns, ready to converge with the divisions and force Samak City to surrender. Curran instructs Ars and Rummel's Canary army to capture the most crucial fortress. The next day, the army sets out. From a mountain vantage point, Ars and his team scout the enemy. Russell thinks it urgent to send scouts to the fortress's peak to assess the enemy's formation, enabling an efficient attack. Mireille, however, thinks Russell is being too textbook, arguing that third-rate commanders only think of using their forces effectively, whereas first-rate ones consider how the enemy might defeat them. Regardless of the enemy's formation, the disparity in military strength is evident. They are bound to lose unless they have a unique trick up their sleeve. Persuaded by Mireille's point of view, Russell rethinks his approach. If it were up to him, he would encircle and besiege the fortress. Indeed, enemy forces below are quietly observing them. Russell acknowledges the lesson and quickly takes notes. Lord Serena's daughter also received news of the enemy's approach. They immediately set up defensive barriers around the fortress, intending to hold the city. Ars and his team only need to use magic to break the barrier and then storm in. Charlotte leads the magic soldiers to launch a coordinated attack on the fortress, but unexpectedly, the barrier remains intact. However, Charlotte hadn't acted yet. The magic she gathered created a tornado-like airflow, with flames bursting in the air. As Charlotte recited the spell, a massive fireball shot out and instantly shattered the barrier. However, just as everyone was preparing to attack, the barrier miraculously restored itself. Mireille recognized this as a repair spell, indicating a powerful mage on the other side, seemingly eager to challenge Charlotte. When it comes to magic, Charlotte has never been afraid of anyone. The other soldiers began collecting magic potions, preparing for a prolonged battle. Serena knew their intentions but remained calm, as they didn't need to win, just wait. Indeed, a magic soldier soon received a message from a scouting unit at the foot of the mountain, reporting about 1,000 enemies approaching, just as Russell had predicted. They proceeded with the plan, and Rummel dispatched 2,000 soldiers to meet the enemy. But then, further information revealed that the enemy's main force seemed to be waiting in the rear, with 10,000 troops coming. Mireille quickly realized that the enemy was betting everything. Ars asked what to do, as they could no longer proceed with the plan. Facing such numbers, they couldn't win if they went to meet them, and couldn't capture the fortress quickly while risking being sandwiched by the enemy. Unless they could seize the fortress before the encirclement team arrived, and wait for Curran's main forces to support them, thus encircling the enemy in turn. Alternatively, they could retreat to minimize losses. Rummel didn't hesitate to choose the latter, unwilling to risk 4,000 soldiers. However, Ars stopped Rummel, believing in his subordinates' capabilities. He trusted his judgment and his comrades, and asked Leeds if he could hold off the enemy's 10,000 troops for half a day. Leeds boldly claimed he could hold them off for a whole day, or even defeat them outright. Charlotte, not to be outdone, said she could break through the barrier in an hour. Ars wasn't just being reckless. A retreat would not only reset the situation, but also give the enemy time to send more reinforcements, potentially prolonging the war. Conversely, capturing the fortress now could lead to significant strategic gains. Ultimately, Rummel chose to trust them. At this moment, the approaching army of 10,000 was feeling triumphant, convinced that the enemy was utterly terrified. But before they could finish that thought, a barrage of arrows rained down from the sky, followed by the notorious Black Reaper of Ramberg. An hour earlier, Leeds had explained the battle strategy to his troops. Even if there was a significant difference in strength between the two forces, fighting on the narrow mountain path would equalize the frontline combat power. To prevent the enemy from spreading out, some soldiers were positioned on both sides of the path to shoot arrows. Leeds would handle the rest. Meanwhile, Charlotte continued to lead the magic soldiers in relentless assaults, but no matter how much they attacked, the barrier quickly repaired itself. It had become a battle of attrition involving magic potions. After all, this was the enemy's home ground, and they were well prepared. The only way to stop them was to destroy their magic potion device, preventing them from using the barrier repair magic. However, Charlotte and her team were already attacking at full strength, and the enemy still had plenty of magic potions left. Preparations made by the Lord just in case. Serena was unhappy, feeling that this was her father's lack of trust in her. So she needed to prove her strength and reinforce the barrier again. At this point, Charlotte and her team had only a little magic potion left. Charlotte sighed and decided to use that move. She instructed her subordinates to concentrate all the magic potion on her, allowing her to cast a massive spell, though it would place a huge burden on the caster. Charlotte assured Ars not to worry about her. Discovered by Ars, she was determined to succeed for her excellent master. Seeing the resolve in Charlotte's eyes, how could Ars possibly stop her? Both of his deputies were striving in their own ways. Charlotte launched a massive spell, a sky filled with fireballs, numerous and long-lasting, overwhelming the barrier's repair capabilities. Serena had no choice but to increase her output, but her magic wand and the magic potions behind her were shattered. The barrier completely disappeared. Charlotte turned to Ars with a smile. "How about that? My magic is powerful, isn't it?" Ars also smiled, praising her magic as the best in the world, then caught the collapsing Charlotte. Soon after, Leeds and his troops also returned victorious. The first battle was theirs. Ars and his forces quickly took down the fortress here and occupied all the strongholds. Serena and her soldiers were captured. Curran ordered their execution, citing the risk of rebellion and the need to conserve resources. Despite facing death, Serena remained defiant. It was only then that Ars truly understood the brutality of war. Nevertheless, he couldn't stand by and watch so many die. He argued that killing these people posed a greater risk. They were fighting to unify Mishan, and these captives were Mishan's citizens too. Even if Curran won the war, he couldn't unify the country. Ars's vassals agreed with him. Russell quickly thought of a solution to screen the soldiers for potential talents. Those unwilling to serve them would be disarmed and returned to their lands in exchange for prisoners. Curran accepted this suggestion. Ars also approached Serena, urging her not to speak of death as their lord's duty was to protect the citizens and rebuild their lands. He even invited her to help build a better country after the war, but Serena was unresponsive. Meanwhile, Charlotte expressed her envy of Serena's defensive magic, which, unlike her own destructive powers, could protect without harming anyone. Ideal for a leader. Serena, non-committal, relayed Curran's message to her father, asking whether he wanted to stay with Basamak or follow Curran. She reluctantly agreed. Ars spent the night assessing and returned to his room to find Pham, who had collected 2 pieces of intelligence. The defense of the next target, Samuk City, was formidable, with a gate known as the Iron Wall, and the commander was not Serena's father, but Thomas, a bald strategist known for ambush tactics. Ars quickly informed Curran of this, while Russell stayed to analyze the intelligence from Pham. On the other side, Serena returned with her remaining soldiers, expecting her father's rebuke, but found him just happy to see her alive, leaving her with mixed feelings. The next day, Curran led his army to Samuk City, which was well prepared to defend itself. Curran ordered a full assault. The defending soldiers, confident behind the moat and city walls, felt secure. They just had to operate the artillery. But Curran's soldiers were fearless. And just then, the Iron Wall gate opened. Pham had infiltrated and opened it from inside. Everything started last night. Russell confirmed that the Iron Wall gate was difficult to breach from the front, so he planned to send Pham inside to open the gate directly. The method involved smuggling Pham in during a prisoner exchange. This plan proved successful. Once the gate was breached, a large number of soldiers poured in. Serena wanted her soldiers to resist fiercely, but the Lord had already ordered a full surrender, which deeply upset her. As a child, her father had been brave and became a lord because of his military exploits. He often told her of his fearless adventures in war and had given her a necklace as a symbol of courage. However, since the succession conflict erupted in Mishan, her father had changed, making Serena feel betrayed. Angry, she confronted her father, who immediately told her to escape with others. This broke Serena. She declared her intent to die in battle. Thomas then praised Serena's bravery, but lamented that the city was doomed. Despite expecting defeat, he revealed a strategy that could ensure victory: a magic detonator linked to explosive spells placed throughout the city. The Lord would feign surrender to draw Curran in and then detonate the city, ending the war prematurely. Shockingly, the Lord agreed to this ruthless plan and was about to send his soldiers to safety when Thomas stopped him, insisting everyone stay to ensure the plan's success without arousing suspicion. Serena immediately disagreed, finding Thomas's plan dishonorable. Thomas pressured the Lord, citing Serena's own words about preferring an honorable death to a disgraceful life. Yet Ars's words about envisioning a better future for Mishan resonated in her mind. Seeing the fear in her servants and soldiers, Serena was filled with rage. Just as her father reached for the detonator, it fell to the ground. At that moment, the Lord had a revelation. His reputation and Lord Basamac's wishes were insignificant compared to his care for his people. He would not allow them to be harmed. Thomas mocked him from a position of superiority and then left. His men charged at the Lord, but Serena blocked them. In a crucial moment, the Lord drew his sword boldly, forcing Thomas to order his men to stand down. Serena finally saw her father as the brave man he once was. The Lord then led his soldiers to surrender to Curran, stating that his own fate was unimportant as long as Curran did not harm his soldiers. Curran, educated by Ars, naturally would not do so. Instead, he was grateful that the Lord chose to surrender voluntarily. This not only reduced their casualties but also expanded their military ranks. Meanwhile, Serena found Ars and admitted their defeat, but asserted it was far from over, as he planned to build a stronger territory. They negotiated peacefully, unaware that Thomas still held another detonator. As a commander, he always had a backup plan and was eager to see them all perish in flames. When the detonator was pressed, the explosion was not far away, thanks to Fam's efforts. Following Russell's request, Fam had moved the explosives set up in the city earlier. During their initial defense strategy at the fortress, Russell had sensed something amiss. Considering the disparity in military strength, surrendering and handing over the fortress seemed more rational. This led him to ponder if the enemy had a reason to detain them. Later, learning the enemy commander was Thomas, he figured that even if they lost the battle, blowing up the entire city would eliminate them all, prompting him to ask Fam to investigate and remove the explosives. He did not inform Ars and others to avoid letting uncertain assumptions hinder military actions. Mireille thought this was considerate of him and showed significant growth on his part in the war. On the other side, the Lord apologized to his daughter. Since the outbreak of war, he had been trying to improve his people's situation, continuously accommodating those above. Serena had also come to understand that fearlessness alone is not courage. Laying down weapons is also a form of bravery. The father and daughter reconciled, and Ars's name soon spread throughout Mishan after the war. The news of Ars's first victory quickly reached Lisia. She remained quite calm in front of her maid, who instantly turned into a fanatic once she left. Curran's army, after taking Samak City, set their sights on Belzed. Before that, Curran decided to give his troops 3 days off to rest and recuperate. Ars and his subordinates each had their plans. Only Leeds wanted to stay by Ars's side. The two planned to go shopping together, while Charlotte and Mireille had already gone to feast. Russell was eagerly absorbing knowledge in the library. Ars and Leeds found themselves on a bustling street. Although the war had just ended, the people were smiling. Suddenly, Ars saw a crowd gathered ahead, and a small boat flying out from it. He hurried over to watch the excitement. It turned out to be a toy designed by a man, powered only by a magic stone, which quickly fell and broke. However, the man then took out an egg, twisted a key inside it, and a bird emerged. Ars, very interested despite its impracticality, did not hesitate to buy it for 3 gold coins and praised the vendor for his impressive technology. He tried to assess the man's talent, but saw only a black fog, which made him think there might be a problem with his golden finger. Back at camp, Curran held a military meeting about the upcoming assault on Belzed, one of the 3 major cities along with Santa Pula and Alcantis. They controlled Santa Pula, while Basamac controlled Alcantis and Belzed. Taking Belzed could drastically change the balance of power, but it would be a challenging battle due to its large population and snowy location. It was crucial to capture the city before winter. Curran decided to divide his army into 2 forces. One would attack Star's City, the largest city protecting Belzed, and the other would target Rolt City to the northwest. After capturing these cities, they would move on to Belzed. Curran assigned Rolt City to Ars and Rummel. Russell first tried to negotiate with the fortresses, but all refused even to talk, suggesting they might have to resort to force. Just then, the last fortress responded, surprisingly willing to negotiate if they sent a high-ranking envoy. Rummel knew this fortress was commanded by Lupa, a general Curran wanted to recruit. Securing his cooperation could double their efforts. Rummel naturally assigned this important task to Ars, who had previously negotiated successfully with the Chancellor. Thus, Ars, along with Leeds and Murray, went to the fortress, where they were immediately met with hostility. These soldiers look full of murderous intent. Normally, negotiations shouldn't be like this. After all, if they were killed, Rummel would definitely lead the entire army to retaliate, and the fortress would fall instantly. Mireille analyzed the situation carefully, also considering that this fortress's reply was the last to arrive. It seems that Lupa had some reason he couldn't decide immediately. She took this opportunity to teach Ars that understanding the opponent's true intentions can be the best negotiation material. Their demands were for them to disarm, and only 3 people could enter. Ultimately, Ars decided to take a risk. He put down his weapons and shouted towards the fortress, hoping to find a better solution with Lupa than warfare. Finally, the fortress gates opened, and the 3 of them were let in. However, inside the fortress, Ars's appraisal eye throbbed again until he saw the rumored Lupa and was about to follow him to the meeting room. Ars suddenly tripped on a step, and the toy he bought on the street fell out. The egg automatically opened, and the bird flew out, circling in the air before landing in Lupa's hands. Ars explained it was just a mechanical toy he bought on the street. It seemed Lupa liked it, and Ars offered it as a gift, but Lupa refused. While looking directly at Lupa, Ars's appraisal eye only saw a black fog again, but it quickly returned to normal, and even revealed information he had never seen before, including Lupa's age and background. It turned out this excellent general was married, but there were no signs of a woman living in this fortress. Ars couldn't help but look around, which was noticed by the soldiers who yelled at him. Ars quickly praised their fortress. Lupa arranged for the 3 to stay in a room and then left. Ars told Leeds and Mireille that this man's abilities were indeed very good. Just as he was about to mention his upgraded appraisal skills, he saw a rocking horse behind the sofa, a toy for young children. At that moment, Ars had a flash of insight and pieced together all the clues. He had a feeling that the negotiation would go smoothly. Before the formal negotiations began, Ars first asked about Lupa's wife in Rolt City and their soon-to-be-born child. As expected, this remark immediately surrounded the soldiers. Ars directly stated his guess. Lupa had planned to kill them from the start because he clearly had a wife, yet the fortress showed no signs of a woman living there, indicating his wife was being held hostage in Rolt City. Basamak was threatening Lupa to hold the fortress, or they would kill his wife. Other fortresses were likely in a similar situation, which is why they directly refused peace talks. Moreover, there was no sign of Rolt City sending reinforcements, indicating they had been abandoned. Even so, for his wife and child, Lupa couldn't defect. The only way out was to kill the enemy commander to earn military accolades. That's why he requested a high-ranking person come for negotiations. As for why he hadn't acted immediately, perhaps Lupa was also hesitating. Unexpectedly, all this was seen through by the young Ars. At this point, Lupa could only be honest. He had been prepared to die in battle, but even just once, he wanted to hold his child. Seeing an opportunity, Ars proposed a deal. They would sneak into Rolt City to rescue his wife. If they failed, Ars would offer his head to him. But if successful, Lupa would have to join their ranks. After a moment of thought, Lupa painfully made his decision and asked Ars to rescue his wife. Ars returned and shared the negotiation results with the others. Then the question arose, how can they rescue the hostages? Ars gave an embarrassed smile. We still need the strategists for this. At that moment, a robust man carrying a group of soldiers burst in, immediately questioning Rummel for their soldiers' lack of training. Ars quickly assessed this man and discovered his bravery value was an impressive 110. This man, Klarman, is the leader of the Metrorole mercenary group, known even to Leeds for their flawless mission completion record. They had come on an assignment and did not plan to join Rummel's team. Klarman then turned to Leeds, who was responsible for training the soldiers, pointing out that while camaraderie was good, their combat readiness was lacking. This could be because they had never faced a complete military defeat and could always retreat, unlike his mercenary group that would fight to the last man. The group then started a meeting to plan the hostage rescue. The hostages included Lupa's wife and the families of commanders around Rolt City. Their exact location was unknown, and with 10,000 soldiers in Rolt City, a stealth rescue was impossible. They needed to lure these soldiers out of the city. However, their own forces numbered only 10,000, and in a battle of equal numbers, the defenders held the advantage. Thus, the enemy would likely choose to defend rather than attack. The plan required creating a situation that forced all Rolt City soldiers to leave the city, enabling a swift attack to rescue the hostages. Meanwhile, the Lord of Rolt City received a report from the front lines and was pleased that Rummel had sent an envoy to a fortress now facing off against Canare's army. If they could hold until winter, they believed victory was theirs. Then, a letter from Lupa arrived, detailing that the enemy had around 10,000 troops, but planned a quick, decisive battle using a strong magic troop, with 5,000 remaining soldiers led by an enemy general to attack Rolt City. This letter had been riskily smuggled out under close enemy watch. Lupa emphasized the letter's authenticity, and a fortress soldier collapsing at the city gate convinced the city lord of its truth. Thinking the enemy had only 5,000 magic soldiers, he saw no threat and ordered a field battle, underestimating the magic soldiers' prowess at close combat. This letter from Lupa was discussed with Ars. Ars also informed Lupa that Rolt City had cavalry skilled in field battles, not easily handled by merely 5,000 soldiers. Thus, Lupa was ready to join the battle, but was refused by Ars. They were still in different camps, and if the plan failed, at least Lupa could retreat with his soldiers. Ars advised him to wait at the fortress. Russell detailed his battle plan. A vanguard of 5,000 troops will draw out the enemy. They will then pretend to lose and retreat quickly. They will regroup with another 5,000 soldiers. By then, the enemy will surely have pursued. A large battle will ensue. During this time, a shadow team will infiltrate and rescue the hostages. However, the plan is not foolproof. The retreat requires protecting oneself while evading enemy attacks and escaping. It could be more challenging than expected, and they might get caught by the enemy before they can retreat. Klarman understood Leeds' point and offered his Metrorol mercenaries as the bait. Russell, however, rejected this because it would make the plan too obvious to the enemy. Therefore, Generals Ars and Rummel must lead the vanguard themselves. Before the battle, Ars gave a motivational speech. Their 5,000 troops then engaged in fierce combat with the enemy cavalry, who were as formidable as rumored. The cavalry leader proved especially brave, matching Leeds in combat prowess. However, with skilled military advisors and generals, Ars's side soon faced intense combat. Meanwhile, Captain Pham and his men infiltrated the room where the hostages were detained. They quickly stated their purpose and urged everyone to leave with them. As the time seemed right, Ars did not hesitate to order a full retreat. The entire army rushed towards the forest. The cavalry leader and his men quickly followed, but the city lord stopped them. Realizing the retreat was a feint, as the soldiers' faces showed no fear, he ordered the cavalry leader to split the enemy's forces. He took command of the front line himself. Some soldiers were concerned about the city lord's capability, but were informed by the captain that the city lord was even more fearsome than he was. Both were born into a clan of horsemen known for their brutal raids, and the city lord had even killed his own bounty-offered father to earn a noble title. As Ars' group neared the forest, their troops were suddenly split. The cavalry leader handled the rear half, while the city lord reached the front line and even caught up to Leeds alone. A soldier tried to attack him, but was preemptively struck down. The city lord, wearing light armor for better mobility, killed elegantly. Seeing the situation turn dire, Charlotte instructed Leeds to find Ars. She assured him they would handle the situation here. Ars, at the front, could see the forest entrance, but was continuously targeted by arrows. With insufficient combat strength, he relied on his soldiers for protection. Unaware, his forces began to crumble. Klarman, waiting in the forest, saw this and prepared his men for an immediate intervention. With a third of Ars' troops now unable to fight, the situation had escalated beyond a faint retreat. Now they had no choice but to request urgent support from the Metrorol mercenaries. Ars saw the determination in his soldiers' eyes and decided to continue with the battle plan. Even if reinforcements were called, the odds were still against them. As a leader, as long as one person believed in victory, he was unwilling to give up. Ars drew his sword, raised it high, and shouted, rallying his troops who willingly followed him. Suddenly, the enemy disappeared as they ran. Astonishingly, the cavalry seemed to fly, swooping down from the sky to strike at Ars. Fortunately, Leeds arrived just in time to block the attack, boosting the morale of the troops. They were almost at the forest when enemy reinforcements arrived first. Now, surrounded by enemies on both sides, they seemed trapped. However, the enemy in front bypassed Ars's army and attacked the cavalry behind them. It turned out to be Lupa. He was supporting the Canare army, instantly changing the situation. The cavalry captain, unwilling to retreat just yet, shot an arrow at Lupa before leaving. The battle finally paused, but Ars could not relax. Lupa's presence meant the betrayal was exposed, cutting off Ars's own escape route. It was lucky they won, as Lupa would have lost everything had they lost. Unbeknownst to him, Lupa was touched by Ars's dedication to saving his wife and could not stand by idly. At this point, Lupa's choice was clear. Serving a capable leader is an irreplaceable honor for a knight. He knelt on one knee and swore loyalty to Ars, who promised never to let him down. Meanwhile, the cavalry captain immediately had his magic soldiers send a message to the city to kill the hostages. Little did he know, Fam and his team had already rescued them, except for Lupa's wife, who was still descending when soldiers returned. With Lupa's arrival, Ars and his group were able to retreat more easily. However, Lupa realized his back was covered in blood and knew he might not last much longer, but he said nothing. Meanwhile, Fam was protecting Lupa's wife. They hid in a small room waiting for the soldiers to pass. Unexpectedly, at this critical moment, Maria went into labor. Fortunately, the soldiers were distracted by another suspicious area and ran off. Maria had bitten her hands deeply to stay silent during labor, and her resilience moved Fam. He promised to safely bring her back to her family. On the other side, Ars and his group entered the forest, uncertain if the enemy would follow. Russell confidently predicted they would, as he and Miss Murray were prepared. However, the Lord saw through their strategy, knowing advancing would spring a trap. Yet some soldiers, disbelieving, felt the enemy was already weakened by a third and could be defeated despite any traps. They rushed out without waiting for the Lord's order, eager to claim victory. Hearing this, the remaining soldiers followed. The Lord, initially reluctant to take risks for short-term gains, was flustered when his close friend also rushed out, forcing him to lead the remaining soldiers in pursuit. Unbeknownst to him, Russell and Mireille had orchestrated the initial charge, with Mireille even disguising herself in enemy armor during the chaos. Ars and his group met up with a mercenary band, preparing for a major battle. Klarman advised them to rest, letting the mercenaries handle the fight. Soon, the enemy walked into traps, marking the start of the battle. The mercenaries charged, recognized as the fearsome Metrorol band, causing the enemy to flee in terror. But escape was impossible. Klarman and his men surrounded them. The soldiers, less adept in forest combat, were overwhelmed until a cavalry unit arrived. Klarman ordered the capture of this unit, but the captain charged through the encirclement towards Ars and his group. Leeds responded by slashing at the horse's legs, causing both horse and rider to fall. Leeds then engaged the captain in a one-on-one duel. Both were highly skilled, each with a valor rating of 89 and grade A infantry skills. But the captain's longer weapon gave him the advantage, pushing Leeds back against a tree. So when the captain swung his axe, it stuck deep into the tree trunk and couldn't be pulled out immediately. Leeds seized the opportunity to jump onto the large axe, pushing the enemy back and winning the duel. Ars was not surprised at all. Although their combat values were the same, Leeds's intelligence far surpassed his opponent. Leeds, superior in both strength and intellect, truly impressed Ars, who felt proud to have such a subordinate. Despite this, Leeds did not belittle or underestimate his opponent. Following that, the Lord charged in with a large group of soldiers. Upon seeing the captured captain, he became enraged and lost his rationality, swinging his sword in attack. Klarman defended with his own sword and used his immense strength to send the Lord flying, striking the enemy leader in one blow. Ars and his group were astonished. Was this the strength of someone with a valor rating over 100? Now, with both enemy leaders captured, the remaining soldiers had no choice but to surrender their weapons. Ars then gave a post-battle speech and announced their victory. The captain blamed himself for falling into the enemy's trap, slashed the ropes with a gun tip, and drew a dagger, preparing to commit suicide to apologize. However, at the last moment, it was the Lord who stopped him. The Lord then confessed emotionally, admitting that he should have abandoned them, but was reminded of the taste of the soup the captain once gave him. This realization clarified his feelings, and he was relieved that his close friend was still alive. The captain dropped the dagger, wiped the tears from the Lord's face, and they made a pact to return to their hometown after the war. Once the leaders and soldiers were taken away, Ars rushed to thank Lupa, telling him he would soon see his wife. Before he could finish, Lupa collapsed. Ars then noticed he had been bleeding from his back. He urgently called for the medics. Lupa had endured the pain without complaint because he knew that falling might demoralize the soldiers. The medics quickly stopped the bleeding, but Lupa had lost a lot of blood and needed to stay awake. Ars comforted him constantly, but Lupa was prepared to die, even recalling his dreams of living peacefully with his family and dog in a small house if peace were restored. Ars cried, promising to create a peaceful world and urging him not to give up. Yet, Lupa slowly closed his eyes, reflecting on a life almost entirely spent in battle. He had resolved to keep fighting, but his wife had brought him to a new world of happiness. As long as he was with her, even the smallest things brought him joy. In a fleeting moment, Lupa seemed to see his wife reaching out to him. He reached out to take her hand, and to his surprise, it really was his wife who had returned. Lupa instantly brightened up, sat up, and hugged his wife. Fam was also relieved to see this and handed their newborn child back to Lupa. The family of 3 was content and happy. The scene moved Ars to tears. Afterwards, they cleaned up the battlefield and mourned. Both sides had lost many soldiers in the battle. Ars ordered the surviving soldiers to bury all the bodies. He knew that war brings sacrifices, but whether fallen comrades or slain enemies, they all had families and things they held dear. Determined not to let these sacrifices be in vain, Ars resolved to create a peaceful future. For this, they needed to keep moving forward and win the next battle. Watching his back, Rummel couldn't help but praise him, remarking on his general-like stature. That night, everyone camped and rested. Ars was in his tent, busy writing letters to the families of the deceased soldiers. Unable to bring them back to life, he could only offer some comfort to their families in this way. As he wrote, he recalled the moments he had spent with those soldiers, remembering every name and face. Leeds sat down beside him to help write the letters. Outside, Charlotte silently watched. She had come to bring Ars food, but now she let the two of them be alone. The general was captured, and Ars's group easily entered Rolt City. They could now rest comfortably until Lord Curran from Stars City returned. At that moment, Captain Pham approached Ars angrily to settle accounts because the hostage rescue reward was short 1 silver coin. Ars hurriedly explained that it was likely a mistake due to being busy and promised to rectify it immediately. He then issued a new task to Pham, asking him to report their victory to Curran and to investigate the situation in Stars City. Recognizing Ars as a good client, Pham accepted the task without hesitation and set off for Stars City that evening with 2 subordinates. His subordinates felt that Pham was getting too close to Ars. Just as Pham was about to explain, he saw thick smoke ahead. The camp where Curran's troops were stationed had been set on fire, targeting their supplies. To worsen matters, other supply units had also been attacked, likely losing more than half of their supplies and magical water. Pham decided it was not the time to contact Curran and immediately sent his subordinates back to report to Ars. This plan was orchestrated by Thomas. Now, with a shortage of supplies at Curran's End, and Stars City being easy to defend but hard to attack, they just needed to hold out until winter to see the outcome of the war. Although Thomas did not underestimate Curran, knowing they would quickly devise a strategy, he aimed to strike at their weaknesses before they could respond and secure a victory in one go. The weakness was Curran himself, an excellent general whose excellence meant he could not stay back at St. Pula City, but had to lead on the front lines. Capturing Curran would cause his army to fall apart. Meanwhile, Ars's group received news of the loss of supplies and magical water at Curran's End. Russell immediately analyzed the situation, while Mireille guessed that the enemy was likely her own brother. Additionally, Fam's subordinates reported seeing the enemy's magical troops carrying a large spellcaster into the mountains. Knowing that Curran's forces could no longer use magical attacks due to the loss of magical water, and the enemy had moved their defensive magicians to attack, it seemed they intended to launch a magical attack from the mountains, a distance seemingly too far. However, Mireille saw through the enemy's intentions and declared the outcome. Curran was likely to die. She instructed Fam to quickly lead his mercenaries to Curran's main camp. This was a difficult task for Fam, who was about to refuse when the sky suddenly darkened and heavy rain began to fall, just as Mireille had predicted. The enemy's magicians had gone up the mountain to cast a large-scale rain spell, causing a torrential downpour. The roads at Curran's camp were poor and quickly became muddy, greatly reducing mobility and causing chaos. In such conditions, distinguishing various noises was impossible, presenting a perfect opportunity for a surprise attack. As Mireille had predicted, Fam quickly led his men to Curran's camp. However, the enemy arrived first. Fortunately, Curran's keen eyesight allowed him to quickly realize that the approaching troops were not his own. He understood the enemy's intentions, but he was not afraid. He raised his long sword and ordered his soldiers to attack. They charged bravely. Curran faced Thomas, who was on horseback. The muddy ground hindered his performance, but even so, Thomas couldn't easily defeat him. Thomas shouted, "Curran is here!" to draw more soldiers. Just as Curran was preparing to fight, darkness suddenly enveloped the area. Then Fam appeared behind him, explaining that it was shadow magic and that he had been sent by Ars. Relieved, Curran followed him. Fam used shadow magic to escape with Curran, eventually lifting the spell to allow Curran to proceed with two of his subordinates. The enemy was close behind, so Fam stayed to cover their retreat. He used shadow magic again to trap Thomas and his men, hiding his presence completely in the darkness and successfully ambushing two soldiers. However, Thomas was no ordinary foe and quickly parried the attack, even wounding Fam. Fam didn't intend to defeat him there. He was just buying time for Curran to escape. When the time was right, he lifted the spell, and Thomas led his troops to retreat. The next day, the rain stopped completely. Curran quickly rallied his troops, ready to launch a full attack. Fam, feeling his task was nearly complete, planned to return to Ars for his payment. Unexpectedly, Curran had already prepared several bags of gold for him and even offered him a position directly under him. However, Fam was not interested and declined the money, as his loyalty was to Ars. Curran was slightly annoyed but asked Fam to convey his gratitude to Ars. On the way back, Fam asked his subordinates if he should have considered Curran's offer more carefully, but then he remembered his days as an assassin for hire, despised by both his victims and those who hired him. He had been shunned everywhere he went until he met Ars. Back with Ars had already been contacted by Curran, who warned that Fam might ask for a hefty fee. As Fam began to confirm this, Ars noticed the injury on his arm and immediately checked it, asking if it had been properly disinfected. Fam was unaccustomed to such concern. His shadow group was made up of wanderers and criminals, which is why they took any job. As he said this, he made a fearsome face and asked if Ars was afraid of them. Ars was slightly puzzled and said he had never thought that way, especially since Fam always exceeded his expectations and had never betrayed his trust. They had won many battles largely thanks to Fam's help. These words were very pleasing to Fam, who couldn't help but laugh heartily. He then asked Ars if he wanted to take him on as a retainer. The team members were stunned, but the captain quickly convinced them. Fam was very optimistic about Ars and wanted to stay by his side, feeling that this would allow him to continue living as a human. Thereafter, Fam and the other team members swore their loyalty to Ars. Meanwhile, on the walls of Star's city, the soldiers were drunk, as they only needed to wait for winter to arrive. Only one red-haired soldier kept watch outside the city. Another soldier tried to take his long spear, but was shocked by its weight. Although the ordinary soldiers could not even lift it, the red-haired soldier wielded it with impressive agility. Ars and his forces are finally set to attack the city of Stars. Upon reaching the outskirts, they immediately contact Curran to commence combat. Their strategy involves surrounding the city with 50,000 of Curran's main troops, while 5,000 Ars troops attack from the north. The enemy's commander, a county governor under Belzed, concentrates his magic soldiers in the south to counter the main force, leaving just enough in the north to oppose the 5,000 troops. Unfortunately for the enemy, Charlotte from Ars's side can single-handedly take on 5,000. Ars's 5,000 soldiers hold their position, with only Leeds riding out at full speed with Charlotte. The burning arrows do not touch them, and the captain calmly orders an increase in magical amplification. However, the cannonballs are also ineffective, being sent flying back by Charlotte. She then fires at the city gate, blasting a large hole through the wall. Seeing the opportunity, Ars leads his army in a charge, calling on the Metrorole mercenaries to spearhead the attack, opening the south gate for Curran's forces from the inside. Klarman immediately takes command in battle, and Ars meets up with his vassals. Seeing the walls collapse, the enemy soldiers quickly lose morale, except for a red-haired soldier who remains defiant. Soon, Ars's forces break into the city, with Leeds bravely fighting hundreds single-handedly. All enemies in front of him are defeated. Seeing this, the captain can only surrender, hoping Leeds would spare the soldiers. Suddenly, the red-haired soldier jumps out, eager to fight. Bram falsely claims he is 17 to bypass the captain's restraint, showing the stubbornness typical of Stars's troublemakers. He challenges Leeds, the strongest among them, and Leeds accepts without hesitation, giving the boy a lesson in true strength. Bram grows more excited with the battle, boasting he is the strongest soldier here, unable to be defeated by others. Facing the formidable Leeds, he feels he has finally met a worthy opponent. Leeds, however, finds the fight dull, managing to defeat Bram merely by dodging, criticizing Bram's reliance on brute strength and emotion with no tactics, even proving that Bram falls for the simplest feints. Leeds is frustrated by Bram's wasted potential. As Ars and others arrive, the fight between Leeds and Bram turns into a coaching session. Ars curiously assesses Bram and discovers the boy's exceptional talent. Realizing Ars's presence, Leeds apologizes for inadvertently coaching an enemy, but his actions have already won Bram's admiration, who immediately kneels to become a disciple, declaring his desire to switch sides. Leeds initially wants to refuse, but Ars, seeing potential, eagerly accepts, urging Bram to join them. Though lacking in intellect, Bram's potential for bravery and leadership surpasses even Leeds, and under Leeds' guidance, his talents are sure to be unlocked. Bram didn't know who Ars was. When he heard that Ars was Leeds' master, he assumed Ars must be even stronger and immediately knelt down. With Bram and Ars insisting, Leeds had no choice but to take Bram as his disciple. After this, Mireille arrived. When the surrendering soldiers saw it was the torture devil Mireille, they were reminded of the fear she instilled and legends of soldiers broken under her control, and they promptly betrayed their comrades to avoid further torment. The Metrorole mercenaries also received the news and deactivated all traps. Fam opened the southern city gate, allowing Curran's main forces to storm in. Seeing the situation was dire, the Lord of Stars City fled with his personal guards. Curran's camp successfully captured Stars City, moving the War of Succession towards its final phase. After settling down in Stars City, winter came with heavy snow. Curran publicly praised Ars, not only for sending mercenaries to rescue him, but also for opening the breakthrough to conquer Stars City. However, this praise caused discontent among others. Later, Curran summoned Ars. Entering the room, Ars felt the tense atmosphere. Curran directly asked him, given his young age and his seemingly miraculous ability to understand people, who he really was or what he was hiding. Ars sensed trouble. Was it because he overshadowed his lord? Was Curran worried about him usurping the throne? Or did he discover that Ars wasn't from this world? Amid these thoughts, Ars decided to be honest, stating he was just a minor lord, aiming to create a peaceful world where his people could live happily. He admitted to having incredible abilities, which he chose to use for his people since inheriting his father's territory. This response was perfect. In fact, Curran always believed in Ars. It was his retainers who doubted. Hearing Ars's answer would surely reassure them, and Curran personally held Ars in high regard. Ars didn't dwell on whether the words were true and only breathed a sigh of relief after leaving the room, thankful for not facing a worse outcome. But the next moment, Charlotte hit him with a snowball. Deep snow had accumulated outside, and soldiers were busy playing in it. Leeds was dragged into a snowball fight, splitting into two teams. Meanwhile, Captain Pham started bets on which side would win. Klarman and Murray stayed out of it, preferring to drink and compete over who could drink faster. Russell didn't join the snowball fight and built a large snowman instead, which was accidentally destroyed during the playful chase between Leeds and Charlotte, nearly bringing Russell to tears. Leeds immediately declared a truce. Both teams decided to help Russell build another snowman, and they ended up creating an even bigger one together. However, their truce meant the gamblers couldn't determine a winner. Everyone demanded that the bookmaker, Fam, return their money. Fam immediately fled with 2 of his subordinates. Seeing everyone enjoying themselves so much, Ars felt content. Charlotte also expressed her wish to enjoy the snow with everyone next year. At that moment, Leeds put a scarf around her. Laughter and cheer filled the air. Silently, Ars resolved not only for next year but for every year to protect these smiles. On the other hand, Thomas was having a tough time. His schemes were repeatedly seen through by Mireille and had failed several times. Just when he was feeling downcast, his superior, Lord Basamac, unexpectedly came to visit him. Mireille and Thomas, siblings, were born into a noble family. Mireille was a prodigy from a young age, always outshining her competitive brother Thomas, who was resentful whenever she stole the limelight. Even when they first served Governor Michan, Mireille secured a position before Thomas. Thomas never denied Mireille's talent, but disapproved of her disdain for their father. He always wanted to surpass Mireille to prove himself. Before he could achieve this, Mireille was exiled, maintaining a carefree demeanor until her departure. Subsequently, Thomas became the new advisor, thinking he had finally outdone Mireille. However, after Michan's region split, the siblings ended up in opposing camps. Mireille could predict every one of Thomas's plans. As Curran's army advanced unstoppable towards the Basamac headquarters, Thomas was filled with guilt and knelt before Basamac to confess his failures. Basamac did not blame him, acknowledging his dedication akin to that of his father, which moved Thomas to vow to fight to the end for Basamac. Meanwhile, Ars and his group were discussing their next move to attack Belzid's key stronghold, the city of Belzid. Thomas considered assassinating Curran, a sign of desperation, making it a perilous battle ahead. Unexpectedly, an envoy from the enemy requested a ceasefire, claiming the city lord did not want further sacrifices since Curran's army was in a superior position. Everyone assumed the envoy sought peace, but they carried a lofty warning instead. The envoy claimed they had developed a massive weapon, a colossal catalyst machine capable of destroying cities with a single magic strike. They warned that Curran's current position could be instantly obliterated if war resumed. The city lord had sent the envoy out of reluctance to destroy his own lands. However, if Curran insisted on continuing, they would be forced to use the massive catalyst machine. Mireille and her group believed this was merely a bluff, as the former governor had never mentioned such a weapon, and Belzid's capabilities did not extend to creating such powerful armaments. Reassured by his group's consensus, Curran instructed his subordinates to reject the envoy. However, Russell remained silent, thinking it reckless to dismiss the threat as a mere bluff, especially since their opponent was Thomas, who might have other strategies. Russell pressed Mireille for more details about their sibling dynamics, wanting to understand the enemy better. Mireille explained how she and her brother became military advisors after their father was accused of treason and executed, despite their father's pleas for clemency before his death. The governor had claimed to receive numerous secret accusations, leading to the loss of their nobility and their father's execution. Meanwhile, Curran received news that a large weapon was spotted on the hills of Belzid. Panic ensued. Was the envoy's warning true? Mireille calmed everyone, suggesting the weapon was a decoy to mislead them, and proposed sending Fam to investigate. Indeed, Fam discovered the supposed catalyst machine was a fake, lacking essential components like a magic reservoir. This raised questions about the enemy's intentions, as securing more time seemed futile given their geographical disadvantage. Curran recalled that enemy defenses at Belzid City had been strengthened. Perhaps the enemy sought time for this purpose. The scenario reminded Ars and Mireille of a previous simulated battle, where Mireille had used a similar strategy of surrendering troops and spreading false information to lure Leeds into an attack. Now the enemy seemed to be employing a similar tactic by sending an envoy with misleading information. Russell quickly examined the map to predict potential ambush locations, concluding that the forest was likely. This explained everything. Curran then ordered to burn the forest, hoping to eliminate any hidden enemy troops. Mireille was surprised that Thomas had come up with a strategy she had once considered. She thought he was still too inexperienced and anticipated her victory again. However, in reality, Thomas understood his sister better. He never doubted Mireille's intelligence and knew she would predict the ambush and plan to set the forest on fire. To counter this, Thomas hurried his troops to set up magical devices throughout the forest that would explode upon encountering fire. The moment the fire was set, the devices would detonate, potentially causing significant damage to Curran's army. Despite this, Thomas was not blindly confident. He knew the enemy outnumbered them significantly. Even if the explosion killed some, stopping the enemy entirely would be difficult. However, the sudden blast could make Curran's forces suspect their strategy was flawed. While they were still reeling, Thomas planned to launch a direct attack. This was a do-or-die battle, a fight with no return. Thomas gave his troops the chance to leave, recognizing their loyalty, but not requiring them to join him in what could be a suicidal mission. He was prepared to die for Lord Basamak and had made peace with this fate. When he turned around, expecting to see fewer men, he found none had left. Like Thomas's vow to Basamak, his troops had sworn their loyalty to him. Indeed, an army with such resolve to face death unflinchingly is the strongest kind of army. Meanwhile, Curran and his forces had also reached the outskirts of the forest. Curran led his army to the outskirts of the forest, while Russell appeared contemplative. At the same time, Thomas and his forces were ready for the enemy to charge. However, just as Charlotte and the other magicians were about to cast their fire magic, Ars noticed Russell's hesitation and approached him, reminding him that Ramberg's advisory team included more than just Mireille. This spurred Russell to bravely step forward and stop Curran from giving the order to attack. Meanwhile, Thomas and his forces awaited the enemy's assault, but were met with a fireball streaking across the sky, signaling the start of the battle. Suddenly, a barrage of arrows came from behind them. The enemy had chosen to attack from the rear instead of a frontal assault. Thomas immediately adjusted his formation, but it was too late to activate their explosive devices. The enemy's forces disrupted their lines, with Clarmon's mercenaries, fierce frontline soldiers, and hidden shadows dominating the battle from the start. Thomas was puzzled. Why had his strategy been seen through? During this, Curran, who had been observing the battle, ordered that Thomas be captured alive. Thomas, upon seeing this, decided to target Curran directly. Rommel quickly stepped in front, instructing the soldiers to shoot arrows. However, Thomas, determined to protect his own men even at the cost of his life, continued advancing under their cover towards Curran. Just then, a large group of enemy troops encircled them from the right, forcing Rommel to lead the remaining soldiers to pursue them, leaving only Ars and Curran behind. Ars, assessing their capabilities, knew Curran had the upper hand. Yet Thomas's unstoppable momentum forced him to draw his sword and charge. Just as Thomas's blade was about to strike, Leeds arrived just in time, driven by his duty to protect Ars. Leeds knocked Thomas to the ground, and soon a group of soldiers surrounded him. Despite the situation, Thomas refused to give up, fighting desperately even though he knew he could not turn the tide. When Mireille and Russell approached, Thomas finally ceased struggling. After capturing the enemy leader, the battle quickly ended. Ars received a stern reprimand from Leeds, while Mireille showed little sympathy for her brother. Seeing Thomas so defeated, she told him that it was not she who had unraveled his plan, but Russell. She pointed out that if she had been the only advisor, they might indeed have been blown up. Thomas was incredulous, unable to believe that his perfect plan had been thwarted by a child. In reality, Russell had simply heeded Mireille's advice to think from another's perspective, knowing Thomas was obsessed with defeating her and had not anticipated someone else understanding his thoughts. Eventually, Mireille concluded that Thomas was indeed a foolish brother. However, Ars, with his discerning eye, knew Mireille tended to hide her true feelings and encouraged her to express herself this time. Realizing this, Mireille laughed heartily, admitting her defeat, but noting that her apprentice Russell had compensated for her oversight. She considered it a draw. Then, gently patting her brother's bald head, Mireille praised him warmly, instantly making Thomas reminisce about how she had comforted him in the same way after their family's misfortune, assuring him that as long as they had their heads and mouths, they would survive. At that moment, Thomas realized that all these years he had been seeking Mireille's approval. He couldn't help but smile faintly and admitted his defeat, but he firmly rejected the olive branch Curran extended. With no other option, Curran ordered him to be imprisoned. Before leaving, Thomas warned Russell not to be led astray by Mireille. Due to Thomas's failed battle plans, the city of Belzed surrendered without resistance, and Curran's army had now captured 2 of the 3 major cities, with only Alcantis still held by Basamak. Curran began to distribute rewards for their efforts, starting with appointing new governors for Belzed and Samuk, both strategic locations for the ongoing war. Rummel was appointed governor of Belzed, and surprisingly, Lupa, a surrendering commander, was made governor of Samuk. This was seen as a good personnel policy to encourage enemy surrenders. Ars felt Lupa was a suitable choice and believed he could manage Samuk well. But with Rummel moving to Belzed, the question arose about who would manage Canare, his previous territory. Naturally, the role went to Ars. Ars, looking around in disbelief, realized they were talking about him and screamed right there in the assembly. However, this had been discussed by Curran beforehand. As soon as Ars was pushed forward by his retainers, a group of people expressed their disapproval, questioning why such a minor lord should become their equal. Ars himself was not confident, and some said he was only considered because of his competent retainers. However, the lords of Canar, including his father-in-law, who knew Ars well, supported him. They argued that if his retainers were excellent, it was because they chose to follow Ars. Even the governors of the other 2 regions spoke on his behalf, and Lupa had surrendered because of Ars. Why shouldn't such a person be a governor? Finally, Charlotte pushed Ars forward, and he, not wanting to let everyone down, formally accepted the position of governor of Canare to applause from all. However, that evening, Rummel called Ars aside. Rummel had been promoted to governor of one of the 3 major cities, but was not happy because he did not want to leave Canare, where he had grown up, and which was land passed down by his ancestors. He had always worked hard to help his people, and despite the richer resources of Belzed, he preferred to stay in his homeland. But if anyone could take care of his land, it was Ars. Throughout their journey, Rummel had seen Ars's initiative and growth, and felt that Ars could bring about the future of Canare that he envisioned. He asked Ars if he could make Canare a better place, and Ars answered affirmatively without hesitation. The war had finally come to an end, and Ars could return to his hometown. He first sent a letter to his wife, Lisia, and didn't keep her waiting long before he returned home in glory. The villagers lined the streets to welcome him, smiles beaming on every face, and they had even prepared gifts for Ars. There were also families of soldiers who had passed away, but because Ars had already written to them, they were able to stand strong and were ready to support Ars in moving forward. Lisia, unable to wait, rushed out of the house. Initially, she walked with restraint, but soon she ran towards Ars, and they embraced tightly. Shortly after, Ars's younger siblings also ran out, and their mother was both relieved and happy to see the children together. However, there were more important events to attend to. A maid quickly ushered Ars away, and the villagers moved in the same direction. When Ars reappeared in new clothes, he realized it was actually his wedding ceremony. Ars's thoughtful father-in-law knew that they had married in haste without a proper ceremony, so he had specially arranged this celebration. With everyone's blessings, the couple officially became husband and wife. Ars was determined to continue working hard for their happiness.